Hello everyone, my name is Nirgudkar. I'm the CEO of Patient Prism, and we're live here on day 2 at the DICOMA's DSO industry event. What an event it has been, 1,300 attendees, and everybody who's making an impact in the DSO space, whether they're DSOs themselves or partners, vendors, companies that are adding value are all here, and we've had great 2 days. With me today are my good friends, Amber Collins and AJ Peak from Peak Dental Services. They're an amazing organization based in Colorado, now a little bit in Texas. Welcome, guys. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thanks
for having us.
AJ, I know you had a talk this morning about Peak and what you guys have done, and obviously I've been a big fan of how you've built this organization from the ground up, from starting with your dad's practice, I think, and to where you have come, and you've come a long way in kind of setting the right infrastructure for growth. One of the big things when I hear you talk at events everywhere is how process oriented you are, and how that has helped you really drive growth and drive change in the organization. So talk to us a little bit about what's the Peak process? What have you done to kind of systematize, formalize your growth and your process so that you've been able to execute now at 45 offices really well?
Yeah, I would say in the early days when we had just a few practices, I'd go to one practice and talk about the recall system because they weren't doing well, and I'd go to the other practice and talk about the importance of sending claims and managing up things, but they were doing the recall well, and it felt like the whack-a-mole game at like the county fair. Like I hit it one gopher, and another one came up, and we don't manufacture anything. We're a service business. So we really sat down, and actually Amber helped put this together, where we put together, at the time it was 10, now it's 18 things that we felt that an office needed to do every week. And because it's a service business, we needed a way to get accountability, because it was the whack-a-mole game. An office manager would be good at recall, but bad at, let's say, sending claims. And how do you get good at all of those things and sort of be operationally disciplined?
So you have identified 18 systems and that are consistently optimized and implemented across your entire platform.
And then we benchmark red, yellow, green on all 18 things, every office.
Okay.
So then, that's how Amber will manage, through the regional managers actually will manage the practices, is to, are you doing your job, and are you doing it on all 18 things that we think, is going to do the best shot of running that practice efficiently.
How did you come up with the 18 things? Was it you deciding at the very top, oh, these are the 18 things, or was it a more collaborative effort on behalf of all the team members?
I think it was kind of, we would go into one office, we'd realize 1 or 2 things weren't working, and then the next office, those 2 things were working, but there were 3 things that weren't working in that office. And it's really just as basic as, number 1 is answer the phones, right? And so it can be simple things on this list, but it's all about the accountability measures. So it's, yes, these 18 things are the most important thing to get done in the office, but how do we actually hold everybody accountable without actually being there? Because in the early days, like AJ was saying, he can just walk into an office and know this isn't happening. But we can't necessarily walk into all 45 offices and know that these are the 2 or 3 things in each location that aren't working. So it's a really good way for our regional managers, as well as myself, to hold people accountable.
But dental offices often tell me that we're really busy. We have lots going on. We got to check patients out, check patients in. We got to clean operatories. How do you now get them to do, oh my God, I got to do these 18 things? Or is it just part of their workflow? I mean, how do you get them to really buy into all the things that you've determined to be best practices? But team buy-in is a difficult thing, right?
Yeah.
How do you get team buy-in then?
I think they have to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and everybody knows that we're not here without our patients, and so all of the things on that list are basically providing our patients with the best experience possible. And so as long as you can get them to buy into the why are we doing this, why are we all here, then they understand the importance of every single one of those things. Again, going back to just answering phones, if you're not answering the phones, you're not providing the best patient experience. So I think it's all about getting them to understand why we're doing things.
So you're saying you've got to get the philosophical buy-in from these guys. This is the reason why we're doing it, and once they buy in themselves that, hey, if we're not answering the phones, or if we're not even presenting the treatment, that we may feel guilty about them because it may be costly, but that could cause the patient more harm, then these guys have said, okay, well, I believe I'm in the business of helping people, so I'm going to do it.
Right, and I think they also understand that if you're not keeping on top of these things, your job is actually a lot harder. And so we've tried to lay it out, and we do trainings. It's a 2-day training just around a lot of these things on this accountability measure. And I think everybody really kind of understands, as long as I'm doing these things, the office is going to flow really well. Everybody's job is a little bit easier. And so I think that there's a little bit of that as well.
But what visibility do you have in the follow-up, like the red, blue, green? No, not red, blue, green. The red, yellow,
green.
and green.
Yeah.
Who measures that? And is there like an analyst that looks at this stuff? Who enters all this data so that you, Amber, as the COO, knows that, okay, well, these are the 5 offices in green, these are in yellow, and these are in red?
So our regional managers really are kind of our rock stars, and what we do is we hold the office managers accountable by having them fill out the sheet first. So each regional manager has a sheet per office.
Okay.
The office manager would then say, hey, these are the things that we are doing in the office, these are the things that we're not.
Okay.
The regional manager has a weekly meeting with the office manager, says, yes, that's right, or hey, listen, I just looked and this is actually, should be red or green. Then weekly, that list by region is sent out to the other office managers, so it's kind of a, hey, everybody can see how your friend's doing, and then I'm also included on those. And so I'll do the spot check, and kind of sometimes I'll see something that I think, no, that doesn't seem quite right, and I'll check into it, but it's usually just holding the office managers and the regional managers accountable weekly to making sure they're doing those things.
That's very interesting. AJ, we talk about analytics a lot in this industry, and it's frustrating. You've expressed those frustrations to me as well. I'm like, my God, we have all this tech stack. It's like this tall, right? How many things are we going to use to optimize our practices? And you've thought about this a lot in terms of like, how do we aggregate all this intelligence that sits in 13 different solutions and bring it all together so that I can do something about it, instead of having 15 windows open in your browser and seeing, well, how do my reviews do? Well, let me look at that. How's my patient engagement doing? Let me look at that. How's patient Prism doing? Well, let me look at that. It's frustrating, right?
Very.
So what efforts are you doing? I know you guys recently moved over to one PMS, which is going to kind of be great, cloud-based. I believe it's Denacon.
Yep.
But even with that, you're going to struggle with getting the insights across different platforms. So what's the plan for that?
There's the short term and the long term, and the short term is shoestring, bubblegum wrapper, and duct tape, which, we built the scorecard we want, and that we prefer it daily, but right now it's oftentimes weekly data. And we review that as a team. We actually review with our private equity firm on Mondays. And it's sort of the dreamy scorecard I wished all the data flew in. So we do it through semi-automation, and some of it's manual entry just because it's not all tied in. The end state is really building a data warehouse that basically ties into HR, payroll, ties into the finance accounting. And we have bits and pieces of that, and but not all of it put together. So whether, all up and down the tech stack right now, we have different department leads that flow it into our scorecard. Around patient experience, about employee engagement, productivity, all three things, really important in the business, and then our financial metrics. So today we're kind of a bit of a black box where it's semi-automated and semi-manual, but at least once a week we're getting that snapshot of the holistic set of metrics that no one system today, provides, unfortunately.
And guys, this is one of the best run DSOs in the country, and that's what they have to do. So it's frustrating to be able to get all this data delivered to top management, at least in seeing. And do you guys color code that or no?
We do color code
that as well.
And it, visually, you see week to week, what's improving and what's not, and just getting the trends.
Do you guys budget forecasts in terms of by office, where revenues need to be, where expenses need to be? Is that a pretty rigorous process?
It is, and I'd say we've gotten better every year, and then we take that same discipline even on an acquisition. So forecasting, and it really starts with patient visits, visits per hour and visit per provider and how many providers we have, and actually down to what are their vacation days for the forthcoming year quarter.
Okay.
And
Including doctor off days and stuff.
doctor off days, holidays, et cetera. So we get it down to days worked, holidays, and even their planned vacation days.
And are you pretty close to forecasting? What kind of variance do you see between your forecast and the actual numbers?
It's been within 3 to 4%.
That's pretty awesome.
Maybe not always in the direction I want, but I'm still working with her to get it on the other direction.
How do you guys, one of the big challenges that everybody's facing today is recruiting clinicians, right? They're just not available. We've got problems of stimulus money still being given to people, and it's profitable to sit home than come back to work. Where do you forecast this happening, especially in your markets, Colorado and now Texas? Do you think the hygiene shortage will return back to normal, or do you think you're going to need better scheduling to be able to accommodate the same number of patients? And that's another question, actually. That should be the next question, is how do you schedule for success? But in terms of just the recruiting stuff, what are you guys doing? Are you facing recruiting hurdles? How many hygienists do you need currently?
We need a lot for growth, and our schedules are booked out. It's definitely one of the top 3 things we're working on. I would say the winners in this are hygienists.
Right.
They just are, and I don't think it's going to go back. So
Really?
I unfortunately think this might be a 3 to 5 year issue, or maybe permanent for some period of time for it to correct itself with graduates. And it's like any war for talent in any industry. Nursing's gone through it, et cetera. Like we need to do what's necessary to be the sort of employer of choice. Whether that is giving them the tools and flexible schedule they desire, or compensation, being competitive in benefits. And then we all generally like to stay with where we, our employer, if we like working with whom we feel is our supervisor, which is often the dentist. So we're really engaging our dentists. In the last few months, over half of them have become owners, and just, them taking ownership over, we all, stick around generally, or we leave because of who we directly work with. And so yes, we're going to be competitive on pay, but I'd love to be competitive on, our dentists actually create an environment where the hygienist loves to work in that team environment.
In terms of scheduling, and I've asked this to a lot of the CEOs in the last 2 days, is scheduling has always been a challenge in terms of when we look at production per hour, and we look at average dentist production per hour is like $300 or maybe $250. That's the ADA, and ADA is usually in the lower end. DSOs do a little better job because they highlight analytics that allow these guys to see. But I think it's a function of poor scheduling. Obviously, it's a function of poor case acceptance too, but because we're just doing what the patient just needs at the time and not what they need comprehensively, and we don't have the communication ability to get the patient to do more while they're there, somehow we're just busy, but we're not producing more per hour.
Yep.
Do you guys look at that stuff in terms of what are we producing per hour, and how do we get that number higher, and how do you get the doctors to kind of buy into the better scheduling?
Part of it's training and giving tips, and one of the things we've migrated is dollars per visit. We do convert it at times to dollars per hour. And so there's the training. It's delivered by providers, so it's either a dentist or hygienist,
right,
who tells the before and after.
Okay.
So they're actually talking to another dentist who oftentimes behavioral change, they don't believe it's possible,
right,
and they'll tell their story on how we went from X to Y. The second thing is when we report a lot of the data, we will rank sort. We're not judging.
Right.
We let them judge themselves, but we'll rank sort how the providers are performing, and we'll match it up against patient experience, which we measure.
Okay.
So we're big fanatical about measuring Net Promoter Score, and we'll actually be able to show them a data and get that behavioral change to say, hey, that dentist is doing 800 an hour and has a higher Net Promoter Score than the dentist who believes they can't do it, and they're doing 300 an hour with a lower Net Promoter Score.
Have you done some correlation analysis in terms of NPS to production per hour?
We have, and actually, there is somewhat of a sweet spot, but actually it's positively correlated, which makes
Well, I would
intuitive
assume
sense.
so, right?
Yeah.
It's harder to measure if you do measure it, obviously. Are you doing NPS per patient?
Per patient.
Per patient. What tools do you guys use to do NPS?
We've used a couple different over the years, but currently Podium.
Podium. That's right. Yes, that Podium does
Yep.
provide that.
We had to have to do some custom changes for how we like to measure and track it, but it's every patient visit we ask the Net Promoter Score question.
And I think it's such an easy thing to implement, but I don't see that happen anywhere in our world, at least, where you're asking every customer, would they, and the question most likely is, how likely are you to refer the office to somebody else, right?
That's right.
And it's usually between 1 and 10.
1 and 10.
1 and 10. And it's the most powerful question that you could ask. I think as DSOs think about their platform valuation, when people come in, do due diligence, if you have a Net Promoter Score that's in the high 8s, a 7, 8, 9, you're going to get, people are going to look at you favorably. And so
And there's this belief that a cottage dentist somehow delivers a better patient experience, which I argue, I don't want to go to a heart surgeon who sort of decides my procedure just is a better procedure. Like, there's a way of measuring patient experience, and it's one of the ways we change behaviors to say, no, actually there's a better way, and let me prove it to you by your own patients voting, with the Net Promoter Score. And that's how we're actually able to say, you do all these things, you actually can increase productivity and the Net Promoter Score, which means a better experience. And it's sort of, oftentimes you're thinking, oh, it's a DSO, they're just pushing production. And so when we measure the two together, it's really what changes a lot of hearts and minds of the dentists, and particularly founders
Right.
who have been practicing 20 years. And then they're smart, and when you put the right metric in front of them, it's hard to deny that some of these different procedures systems are going to be more productive, but also generate, better patient loyalty.
it's interesting that you marry those two metrics of the production and the NPS to drive change. And it's what I'm always intrigued by how change management happens in organizations, especially where clinicians are in charge, because they're not really driven by financial metrics
Correct.
as much as other metrics. And I think, and they care about patients a lot. All clinicians do. And if you, and it looks like NPS is a way to measure that, how they're delivering, and they want to be good clinicians, they want to be good advocates for patients, and if you combine those two, maybe change happens faster. That's fascinating.
Even down our call center, we use patient Prism, and I can't tell me how many founders, believe that their front desk can schedule new patients better than anybody else. And, using the tool of Patient Prism, they're vehemently against us using a call center. We said, well, why don't we just test it? Let's just pilot it. And within 2 weeks, we'll turn it on, Patient Prism for their office, and their front desk might be scheduling, 70%. And we said, all right, let's do a pilot. And, the founders, we don't force it, but
Right.
everybody says yes to a pilot. And the call center's at 90%.
Right. Well, we know. When we started with you guys, pretty much everybody eventually came on board to the call center, and we went through all the different processes to incrementally improve. And your call center today is the best in the country in terms of your schedule rate, and to the point where, like, man, this feels good when I look at your data. It's like, man, these guys are really, really good, and you've got a great guy managing it. Luke, I believe, right?
Luke, yeah.
He's phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Shout out to Luke for doing a phenomenal job. One of the questions I have about you, one of the few final ones, is you have an incredible due diligence process when you go and acquire new people to affiliate with you guys, new doctors, and you almost have, because you're so confident in the way you execute and are able to really improve that practice, you don't mind being having a highly competitive bid in the mix, because you know what, when you go in, you've seen the data, you've seen the white space above, so there's that path is very interesting and lucrative to an independent practitioner or a small group that has good clinical people, that just don't have the systems and the processes to really optimize both the top line as well as the bottom line. So has that been the reason why a lot of folks are interested in joining you? Because number one, you're willing to pay a better price than what a normal strategic guy would pay, but at the same time, you have a predictable path to success.
Yep. This really works if a founder is going to do better off than when they were on their own financially, right? And patient experience, but ultimately financially they want to do better, and it's very difficult for a practice to stay the same.
Right.
Dentist sells for them to expect to make more.
Right.
And they're going to be frustrated. So we do a ton of due diligence. We have a predictive model, how successful we think that location will be with us.
Nice.
We'll, do it's almost a 25, page due diligence on the practice, on all the levers we think we could do to improve the practice. And so we'll put more energy actually into the forecast of that practice than we do our base business.
Right.
And we will forecast everything because I want to be absolutely certain that we can actually grow that practice and grow it even if the founder gets ill, they have to leave, something happens. I want to be confident that we're going to be successful in that location. I know we'll be even more successful if the founder stays on board and we do well, but in the event that life happens, that
Right.
we're still going to do well. And that gives it reassurance, right? I mean, prices are high, that we can pay that high price and then deliver the growth. And
Right.
if the founder stays, you can actually pull off the business case where they actually take home more.
More money.
And they've sold, and then they have equity in the holdco for upside. And I need that to be successful, so we put a ton of energy into making sure, when we buy something, we know with a high degree of confidence we're going to do well in growing it, and not just marginally, but significantly in a perfect world.
And have you experienced double-digit growths after you've taken over?
Many, many data points. I don't know if you believe me, but it's higher than 20%. And
That's,
it's not turnaround projects. It's just really being specific about what even a high-performing practice, there's always a few things that they're not doing well that can drive real growth.
Absolutely. Amber, you guys do a lot of work around training. Right? I see pictures every once in a while of Amber doing a training with a group of people all over the place, and you emphasize training a lot. What kind of when a new practice joins Peak, or what kind of training program do you have that's ongoing, one time, ongoing, and all that stuff that kind of gets people? And why do you do it?
Well, we have 8 core trainings that are ongoing, and we're literally, now that we're kind of coming back to a world where we can be in person, we're having a training typically almost every week in person. We've also been working on virtualizing all of our trainings as well, and so our goal right now is we are trying to get 100% of our company to have completed all of these trainings. And so it's extremely important to us, and going back to when we bring on a practice, we're trying to get them through all of those trainings, especially kind of our 4 biggest trainings that all tie back into patient experience and a team running well and running the front office well within the first 90 days. And so we push training pretty hard because we know even if you implement 70-75% of what we're giving to you, we know that you're going to have a productivity boost. We know that the patient's going to have a better experience.
Are you migrating to an LMS within?
We already have one, and we've got most of our trainings already up and running.
And you do measure who's doing it, what kind of grades
We do,
are they
yep.
getting? You've got all the tests built in, gamification, all that stuff.
Yeah, we have visibility and kind of a scorecard of where everybody stands. And then not only that, but on a weekly basis, we're kind of running through who are the key individuals that need to go through each of these trainings, and then trying to make sure that we're getting them through within a
When
certain
do
amount
these
of time.
people train when they're working all the time?
Yeah, good question. So typically we are shutting down offices, or we are, using one person from another location to fill in for a day, and it's usually like on a Thursday or Friday. So it tends to be a day that's either we pre-planned out to have people in person, but as far as kind of virtual training, we, if there's a break in the schedule, or we say, hey, during 30 minutes of your lunch, can you complete this module? And so we're doing it during any free time that we possibly have. It's not necessarily hurting our productivity because it's increasing it so much after they go through it.
And you measure that.
We do, yeah.
You do measure that. Do you have a role for a director of training and education within Peak? Or is it you?
I'll be the role right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, do you plan, as you grow the organization, do you think there'll be a role for somebody who just continuously creates new trainings, looks at performance, and kind of gets that? Because obviously at some point it becomes difficult, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a pretty important piece to the success of our business. And so depending on how that looks, I think it's definitely a possibility.
This is fascinating. I mean, I think if somebody did a case study on you guys, they wouldn't see that you did everything perfectly from the beginning, but they would definitely know that you learned quickly from your mistakes and you constantly iterate on figuring out what, and one of the things I love about you guys that you don't claim to be the best out there, but you claim to be best at learning from your shortcomings. And that's, I think, the best way to grow is to not make the same mistake twice, hopefully. At least 3 times.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes you make it twice because sometimes you have no choice over certain things because it's driven by other people. But I'm always I'm really fascinated by how you built this organization. I can't wait to see your expansion now into Texas and other markets. I think a lot of folks, when they hear your story, are going to see that affiliating with an organization like yours is going to give them a path to improve all aspects of their dental and personal life, right? Because it's also granting them the freedom, because if all you're doing is working in your business in the mouth, and then you're working on the business at night, which you really don't have the time for, there's no life.
Right.
And you're giving them the path, especially these independent offices, smaller groups, to really put in world-class infrastructure systems, learning from your mistakes, learning from your successes to really get them to the next level. So I cannot wait to see what the next 5 years holds for you guys. Thank you so much for coming. I'm a big fan. Thank you for always being welcoming of me whenever I've been in town. So AJ, I appreciate the friendship. Amber,
Thank
likewise.
you. Yeah, thanks.